If there's if you want to speak, there's a sign-up sheet down front, so feel free to come there. This is Government Oversight in Room 307. It says I need to tell that. And then I'm going to ask for, what? 310, I'm sorry. And I'm going to ask Senator Watson if he would pray for us, which is number 11. So if you'll open the word of prayer. Thank you, sir.
All right, let's pray. Dear Father, we just thank you for this day, and thank you for the rain. We thank you for the sunshine. We just thank you for the opportunity to be here and to serve you. Just be with us in this meeting and lead, guide, and direct us, and help us to use your guidance and direction as we make decisions. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We're going to have SB 589. HB. Have to remember we're changing over to the House. I have to rechange everything. Okay. HB 589, HB 925, and HB 1044. Looks like we're starting to see a few House bills because y'all are starting to see a few Senate bills, and so that's good for us as far as that. Representative Chokas is HB 589. If you want to come forth.
Yes, sir.
And let's see, you'll be working off of LC 473003S, I believe. If you will introduce yourself and your wonderful guest next to you.
Yes, sir.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mike Chokas, District 151, and Chairman of the Small Business Development Committee in the House. And I've got Darian Harris, and if you'll introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Darian Harris. I'm from Marietta originally. I work for a company called In-State Partners. We're a GovTech consulting firm that helps emerging GovTech companies with their government affairs needs. I'm here today representing a software company called Polco. Polco, they specialize in bringing together government, constituents, and data to improve outcomes for all.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may begin, we talked earlier, and I'd like to kind of identify this legislation as the Taxpayer Protection Christmas Tree. There's 3 sections to it, and Section 1 is know where your money is going. Section 2 is we want to know what the taxpayers think of our services as government. And number 3, transparency into who's counting our money. So those are the 3 sections, and I'll begin with Section 1. And it establishes the Office of Planning and Budget to issue an RFP with the Georgia Technology Authority and the Department of Administrative Services to develop and publish an interactive taxpayer receipt and budget simulator. And this would allow a user to estimate their individual amount of state taxes that they have to pay, and they can plug in those numbers, and they can see how that tax money that they would be paying would be divided among the different agencies. It would divide the tax categories from income, sales, alcohol, tobacco, motor fuel, etc., and it would produce an interactive budget-based educational tool allowing constituents and legislators to play with tax revenue categories. The key part to this is no sensitive personal information will be collected through these tools. It's an interactive thing. I know y'all have seen that in different other venues. It's a cost-effective solution. It requires the Office of Planning and Budget to do this web-based application, and we want to do an RFP because it would be too expensive for us to hire and maintain personnel to develop this. Indiana and Minnesota have already passed this legislation. Legislation has been filed in Mississippi and Oklahoma, and the states considering this legislation are Louisiana and South Carolina. Chairman Hatchett and Chairman Tillery are both supportive, as well as the Office of Planning and Budget. It would require a one-time funding of $400,000 and $100,000 annually after that. I'll be happy to answer those questions, or if you would like, I can move on to Section 2. at the
You might instruct them only because at the back of the bill, there is a sample of the.
Oh, yes.
A sample of what they would get if you look in the back, and it's a breakdown. So I'll let y'all talk about that, but I know we put
Good.
that in the
I'll let
handout.
Darius talk about that if that's okay,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Yeah,
Let
so
him
there's
talk on
a sample of the taxpayer receipt on the last page, and in this example, it is for an individual that has a gross income of $60,000 and of 32 years of age. It gives a breakdown of that individual would have paid about $3,500 in state income taxes. And so what you'll see is a breakdown from the major tax expenditure categories such as general government, healthcare, K-12 education. And I guess the whole purpose of the taxpayer receipt legislation is to give constituents a more palatable way to digest where their income taxes are going, instead of having them look through a large budget book or try to find these numbers somewhere else in another way. And you can see that under the general government tab, there's an example of how much this would cost this individual, and it would be 6 cents included in their state income taxes. And the categories that you see here are the office, OPB. They'll work in conjunction with the legislature to have all the categories that y'all would like to see on there. And then on the web-based application, there are the information tabs that will link to further description of what these categories actually are and where the funds are going.
We've got a couple of questions. I was just going to ask you, for instance, on your first page, K through 12, that is the part of the state, that is not their property tax that they would pay if they owned a home. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. This does not include property tax.
Okay, okay. Okay, let's see, number 9, who's, who? There we go. Steve Robertson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Representative Chokus. This, I'm reading through the RFP with the Georgia Technical Authority and the Department of Administrative Services to develop and publish an interactive taxpayer receipt and budget simulator. Would this be a proprietary piece of software, or is this off the shelf, or are there examples of this currently?
Yes, there's examples of this currently, in Minnesota, Colorado, have these taxpayer receipts as well. It is somewhat proprietary, but there are several vendors who've done it. Minnesota and Indiana, they passed this independently last year, and through the RFP process, one of their state agencies ended up winning and developing their taxpayer receipt in the state of Minnesota.
So the state agency itself developed that?
Yeah, it did.
Chairman Chokus, is there a cost to this?
Yes, sir. There is a cost. $400,000, the one-time initial cost. And it would require $100,000 annually after that. Chairman Hatchett and Chairman Hillary are supportive of this, and so is OPB.
You say Chairman Hatchett and Chairman Tillery?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you may have to find some better supporters than those two. Thank you.
You want to know cost? Okay. Okay, cost issue. Okay. Section 2.
Section
We'll
2.
let you go Section 2, unless nobody else. Okay, Section 2.
This section I'm really kind of crazy about. This is really neat. It's when our taxpayers, our constituents call, they'll have an opportunity to complete a survey, an automated satisfaction survey. And this requires certain state offices to maintain a record of how many people were disconnected in their calls prior to that. The survey will have 4 questions, and this may not be verbatim, but the questions will be, was the person with whom you spoke courteous? Did the person with whom you spoke resolve the issue that was the subject of your call? And if you were an employer in the private sector, would you hire the person with whom you spoke to work for you? And then the last one was approximately how long did you have to wait on the phone to talk to a person? This information will be compiled, and certain reports regarding the survey, and requires the state auditor to collect an annual. Oh, wait a minute, I missed a spot. I'm sorry. And such executive branch as agency and Secretary of State and Commissioner of Labor, Commissioner of Research, shall make the results of such satisfaction surveys available to the public, to its public website. In addition, each such executive branch or department, agency, Secretary of State, and so forth, shall provide an annual report on the results of the satisfaction surveys to the House Committee on Government Affairs and the Senate Government Oversight Committee. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Did we not have a Senate bill that does the same thing that Section 2 does?
It out of the rules.
Ah,
And so it can be placed into this. Excuse me. It was my bill, y'all. And so
Oh.
what we did, we made this the government accountability Christmas tree.
okay.
And put that together with the other bill. Just
I see.
people.
Okay, thank you.
So you have heard it before?
Yes, it sounded
Okay, you're not
familiar.
dreaming.
I think I put the
You put the amendment.
discontinued calls
Discontinued
into
calls,
it.
yeah. And I would say this is in the process. It's very interesting if you will call one of our agencies and just see how long it takes to get. I think that's one of the things that this really does. It says what we need to be doing is serving the people. Okay.
Yes, sir. It holds our agencies accountable to the citizens of this great state.
Okay. No, okay. You want to go to section number 3, please?
Yes, sir. Section number 3. In our Department of Audits and Accounts, they do a wonderful job, but there are only 200 folks that work there. And during the course of legislation, when we ask for fiscal notes or economic analyses, many times they have to hire a contractor to handle that information, to handle that audit that they're doing. And because of that fact, what we want to find out is where the funding comes from. A lot of these contract auditors come from different universities, and what we want to do is find out where they get grant funding and income to ensure that the information is unbiased that we get. And that's basically what we do. We want to do in Section 3 of this bill, is simply to just kind of shine a light of transparency on who's doing these fiscal notes and economic analyses, and making sure that they're unbiased, and I'm not implying that they are. And because of that fact, we're going to add an amendment to this legislation, and it's what the First Amendment will is on. I can't remember the line. It's line 86. And instead of 5 years, it'll be 2 years. And after years, there'll be a period, and related will start the next sentence. And then on line 88, to give the Office of Audits and Accounts time, we would like for this legislation to start January 1st of 2025 and have a 2-year sunset on January 1st, 2027. And that way, in that 2-year period, we can determine if the information is necessary, and we can look at it again. If it's unnecessary, it can go to the garbage can.
I want to ask a question because of the
Yes, sir.
the amendment, and this may be for Ledge Council. The sunset provision, would it apply to? It would apply to all three parts, or just to that part only? If I could get that from Ledge Council, just to ask that question. Okie doke. Thank you, sir. Because that came in and late, and just want to make sure we're right on that. We did 2. That was 3. He just did. Okay, we're gonna come back. We'll come back to questions while he's researching that for us. In the back of your packet, there is a single standalone, which is an amendment that he is bringing with him, and it goes to 2 years rather than 5 years on the contract past records. and brings it to January 1 of '25, and then expiring in 2 years. Okay, sorry about that. I didn't get there.
And if I may add, it makes this information available to the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker of the House, and the chairpersons of the House Committee on Ways and Means and the Senate Finance Committee.
Okay, and I'll let you counsel, just for everybody, said that it would only apply to Section 3 for this last section from that standpoint. And then number 5, is it Senator Harrell? Oh, Senator Harrell.
So I want to come back to Section 1. Is that okay? Okay. So Section 1, are you working the appropriations process to put the $400,000 startup costs in this year's budget?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
As I
And
said, Senator Tillery and Representative Hatchett have been very supportive of this.
but you put the $400,000 on the House side of the budget?
I haven't put it personally.
Is it in it?
It should be in it. I don't know that for a fact because I haven't seen it.
Okay. And does your company do this kind of work?
Yes.
Okay, so you would be interested in
We would be-
pursuing this contract?
We would be interested, and we've had conversations with Chairman Wiedauer over the appropriation on the House side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sharing the same concern about budget. I
Yes, ma'am.
don't think I saw if there's a fiscal or we have appropriated that money in the budget now. You're saying it's coming or?
And if you'll look on the last page, it says that the will not take effect unless the money has been appropriated.
But we have not appropriated that money.
We
Yeah.
haven't passed the,
We haven't,
20
we haven't passed the budget yet.
yeah, we haven't passed the budget.
But it
yet.
is in there.
It should be in there. I
The
don't
House.
know that for a fact because I haven't looked at it.
Okay. Second question, you represent the software company, is that correct?
That's correct.
What's the name of the company?
Polco,
Okay.
Polco.
Now, I do have some concerns about maybe data harvesting on an application like this. Can you discuss that at all?
There's no data collection.
There's no data collection on it?
No, constituents won't enter any sensitive taxpayer information. It'll, like I mentioned on the example receipt, it would only ask for your income and your age.
Okay. And then how does the software promote like accountability and transparency, which is what I'm assuming that you're trying to do?
Because what it does is it takes the current year's budget and whatever the tax rate is, and it breaks all of that down for taxpayers to see in a more palatable way, instead of saying, for example, we spent $2 billion on education to the average taxpayer. I don't know what that means. I don't even think that they could imagine what $2 billion looks like. But if I can go into this taxpayer receipt and see that, my tax contribution was only $10 to education, I think that gives a taxpayer more of an understanding of what their government is doing, thus showing that transparency and accountability. And say if a taxpayer doesn't want to pay that $10 or feels like, maybe I should be paying a little bit more for educational costs, then they know who to contact to kind of move forward from there, which would be their local representatives.
May I continue, Mr. Chairman, in response to that? There's no sensitive information that is collected to the use of this tool, so we're very sensitive to that. And then the second thing, it puts on a personal level, because we get so many questions, well, you're spending too much money on this or not enough money on that, and this will be a tool where we can actually say our constituents, well, you plug in, the numbers that you want, and then you can see whether you're paying so much towards a different program or part of the budget and so forth. So it gets them more involved, and it gives them better information so that when they call us, we can say, look at this, you're really only paying this amount of money. It's not, to use your example, $2 billion. It's only your portion, which is a small percentage of your income tax.
This, to the gentleman, is this a web-based program?
Yes, sir. So what the bill is calling for is for OPB to develop 2 web-based applications. So essentially, I guess it would be a hyperlink that could be posted on OPB's website, DOR's website, the Senate's website, House of Representatives website.
Okay, thank you. And to Senator Merritt's concern, how many of these does your company currently operate around the country, these types of?
These types of deals, we currently operate in about 250 counties and municipalities statewide, Colorado. We also have a federal budget simulator that we put together in conjunction with PBS, which goes into the civic education component of all of this and kind of developing lesson plans for kind of 7th through 12th grade education for them to kind of, go through and get the opportunity to mess with the budget and kind of get to see it a breakdown of state income taxes.
So it's a civics education type program, is what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, that's not part of what we're doing here, though, right?
It is part of the budget simulator.
It could be.
It could
Okay.
be. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
What is this company based? What is this company based?
Denver.
Denver, okay. So any other company does this kind of stuff, or you are the only one in the country?
I believe there are 2 others.
Two other companies?
2 others, and then as I had mentioned previously, the state of Minnesota, they decided to devote their resources into building it in-house.
Thank you.
Okay. You said you had a federal one as well. That would be a very interesting one, just to kind of see what your federal money does. I can see that as a,
Yeah, you open it up and it's a big red negative.
okay. Okay, that would be interesting. All right. Let's see. We've got to do, any other questions? We've got an amendment. We've got to accept the amendment. Am I correct? We'll do the motion on the underlying bill, okay?
I'd actually like to make a motion that we amend the bill to remove section 1.
To remove section 1. Oops. Okay. Yeah, we'll do a due pass, and then we'll consider the amendments, because you will be the second amendment to that portion. Okay, let's do that. Okay. What is the pleasure of the committee? Have a motion?
I'm sorry, was this for the amendment?
This is for the underlying bill first. Then we'll do the amendments.
Okay.
We have a motion. Motion, Senator Watson. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Senator Roberts. Okay. All in favor of the underlying bill?
Oh,
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Sorry.
no,
Then we go to the
discussion.
discussion,
Which is the amendment.
which is the amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And in the amendment, you changed dates. That was one. And you also put a sunset provision as well, so that it will die a death without having to deal with it, which I think we ought to do that on a lot more things. You and I talked about that. just a little bit.
Yes, sir.
The old act. Okay. So we have that amendment. We have a motion on the amendment to change the dates. Got the motion for Senator Roberts? A second? Okay. Discussion on the amendment? No? Okay. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hand. Okay. That's unanimous for you. Okay. And now we have a proposed, let me go to you because I'm on number 5. Thank you. Senator Hare.
I guess I'd move that we amend the bill by removing section 1. That would be line 17 through 48.
17 through 48. Okay.
17, 18, and 19.
We have discussion on the proposed amendment to delete lines,
Actually, it might be line 15.
line
'Cause-
15.
Yeah. Yeah, line 15 through 48.
Okay. Any discussion on that?
I'm just curious to hear the reason from Senator Harrell. I think, you know, there was some concern about the fiscal note, and I think the one thing that was placed in there that this would only happen if the money was placed in there.
That's correct.
And my understanding from your comment was that the House Appropriations Chair and the Senate Appropriations Chair, neither one, and to use your word, neither one had any negatives or pushback on this?
That's
Okay.
correct.
So,
And so is OPB.
I just want to make sure that we're all hearing the same thing, because I think we all had some of the same concerns with the funding side. So,
It's just a
yeah.
cost.
Let's see. Oh. There you go. There you go.
For me, it's just an overall cost concern. It just, when you weigh the costs and the benefits, I just don't see the benefit to justify the cost.
And if you don't mind me sharing, my only thing was the part that impressed me the most, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the representative, was the civics side of it, so that the kids that we all represent would be able to go in there and have a better understanding of government budgeting, because you know, I have a daughter I love very much, lives in California, and a lot of her friends talk about things that are free. And we have that conversation about what is free. And so that's the part that really caught my attention, was if this is an opportunity for us to educate our kids in school, who hopefully one day will be sitting up here, and when all of us, our hair's either fallen out or turned the color of mine, are at home, and they're running this state, that they come in the door with an education that some of us did not have. So that's the only reason I really like that particular part. And I'm sure the gentleman understands that this would have to go through an RFP process, and it would be an open competition amongst all providers, that we are very hypersensitive on our side of the building about vendor type legislation, that we are very much level playing field, and the best use of the taxpayer's dollar is our concern, especially this time of the year when we're just getting a budget as late in the season as we are, and we have to be very particular in how we do it. But that would be my only concern, is I think it's a tool for our kids that would be very valuable, and I respect the senator's concerns.
Okay. Senator Ramon, I believe you were next.
Just a quick comment, and if it's in the budget, you're gonna see the budget, I guess, next year, so we can always amend that, get the Senate, and always put it back, you know.
And thank you. And you said that if the money was not,
In the bill, it says, that, you know,
that's the last part, I believe, of the bill.
that if the money is in the budget, we do not have, or at least the bill was not intended to put money in the budget, or circumvent the appropriations process. So only if the money was appropriated would this move forward.
Okay, okay. Senator Harrell, you have
I was
another.
going to say, in respect to the civics lesson part, you could combine a civics lesson with a math lesson by having, sharing with the kids the pie graph of what we spend the state budget on, and then having them divide by the population of Georgia, and they could come up with this themselves.
Okay. We have an amendment is in discussion right now. Am I correct? That's where you see it? That's where you see it? Amendment 2. And any further discussion? We don't have any. We've done that. The wishes of the committee on Amendment 2. Do we have a motion? We have a motion. Senator Howard, and we have a second. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of Amendment 2, if you will, raise your hand. 4, okay. And against? Okay. Okay. That puts us in a posture of Section 2 being there, Section 3 being there, and the amendment if I remember, am I correct, the amendment on number 1 is to section 1. Am I correct on that? We have a new section 1, new section 2.
And the second part of amendment 1 was to section 3.
Is that right?
This is address lines 88, 89. That's part of section 3.
I think they were both section 3.
They were both for section
What was section 3?
Just for 4. You got, so that was for 3, correct? So amendment 1 goes to 3. Amendment 2 goes to 1.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just making sure we've got those correct as we go through those. Okay. Okay, so now we have the underlying bill. We have amendment 1. We have amendment 2, which strikes number 1. Okay. So that we have a motion from the committee on the amended bill. Motion to pass by Senator Merritt. We have a second.
Second.
Second, okay, there. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, passes unanimously on that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I
you,
will
Mr.
work from
Chairman.
there. Okay, thank you much. I appreciate that. All right. Yeah, put me down. Okay. Let's see, Representative Sands. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee.
Let's see. And did I understand we had an amendment on this?
Yes, sir. Legislative Council had given a recommendation just to clarify some items, just to make it stronger in terms of, do you want me to start with the LC of the substitute?
Why don't you do this? Give us the LC on the substitute and then tell us what the amendment
Highlight the changes.
if you
So,
will.
yes, sir, the LC is 460869S. Is that what everyone's working with?
Okay.
And then the modification can be found in line 21, just in effect on January 1st, 2024. So since we're referencing federal code, just to make sure we're not subjecting Georgia law to another government entity, it puts a timestamp on what reference we're making so that if the federal code changes in the future, Georgia's law isn't getting modified without, approval of this body. And then lines 30 through 32 just makes it clear the supremacy clause takes care of this, but in case there is any interference with federal code, that the federal code would supersede the law here, the bill here.
Am I correct, as I understand it, this is dealing with some of the things we dealt with COVID?
Yes, do you want me to go over the overall bill at this?
Why don't you do that for us as well? And then we'll come back to the
changes.
Small changes that were made.
So I'll go backwards I'll go back to the initiation of the bill.
Okay.
It simply provides faith-based institutions, whether they be churches, synagogues, mosques, all faith-based institutions, what is called a most favored entity provision, so that if any business in a jurisdiction is open, if a jurisdiction allows for a X or Y business to open, that a faith-based institution is automatically put into it. It's a relatively common sense measure. It gives clarity to our faith-based institutions that if Walmart if a grocery store opens, if any other business opens, they're automatically aligned to it. There's no conflict with what Georgia practices. This is why we're one of later states. I think 32 other states have already enacted this legislation in the House committee and in the House floor. It passed unanimously without a single no vote. So I think it's a bipartisan measure to signal that we respect the rights of Georgians to practice the faith that they believe in, and we don't want there to be interference if it's not possible. Again, if there's a prohibition on all businesses being closed, that doesn't restrict faith institutions from being included in that restriction. But if there's openings of any entity, then the faith-based institution would qualify as part of that lift.
Thank you. While I appreciate the faith-based part of it, I was down in Mississippi after Katrina hit. So in this type of situation here, if we're doing recovery and they allow, and let's talk about the one business that seems to always open before everybody else, a Waffle House, opens. So what this would do, this would allow faith-based ministries to open and say, offer disaster relief supplies and other things that these institutions normally do during this time, where if all businesses were closed under some type of executive order, these faith-based charities and entities would also be required to close. Am I tracking? Is that correct?
I think as soon as you mentioned Waffle House, I got a little distracted because I thought I got hungry. But I would say your waffle would be comparable to a communion wafer. So the waffle and the wafer would be treated equally under the law. But we didn't go into discussion on their implications of emergency relief services. I'm not going to say there's probably not already an ability for them to operate in an emergency relief capacity. But if the campus was restricted from being open with a government restriction, then this would be lifted if another entity like a Waffle House was allowed to be lifted.
Okay.
So that would track, I believe, your question.
Now, you said this passed out unanimous in the committee and in the House?
Both in the committee and in the House, it passed with a complete yes, vote, complete consent.
Is that your first unanimous bill out of the House?
You know, I wouldn't say the first, but it's the first in recent memory. So,
thank you.
Good bill. I want to recognize the other members, but I know in the towns that I represent, this was an issue that people were upset about because some businesses could, some couldn't. Okay, Senator Merritt, is that you, number 6? There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, if we're talking about the same bill, 925, HB 925?
yes, ma'am.
You're saying that bill passed unanimous?
I believe so.
No, sir.
I apologize. I wasn't trying to swindle.
Okay, that was just one of my questions. Yes, it was 50 nays on the House side.
My sincere apology.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify for the record so we make sure we're getting that information correct.
You are correct. I apologize. It did pass with bipartisan support. It did pass in the committee, I believe, with a unanimous vote, but you are correct. There were nay votes. I apologize.
Right. It looks largely on party lines, but that's a whole. I just want to make sure that we're getting it correct. But I do have another question.
We definitely have more than
okay.
50 in Democrats in the House. So,
but not unanimous. We can agree
I
on
do
that.
apologize.
Okay. My second question is, I understand the intent of your bill. My concern here is, and my question is, why would we not adhere to the guidelines of our health officials? As we are aware, large assemblies, even in the church, were a lot of times where a lot of the spread was happening. And the intent of guidelines from our health officials is to control spread. And that means, too, even if people are attending church that maybe are not sick, maybe they have an elderly person at home that is sick. So the intent is to control spread. I get, you're trying to be exempt. So why would we not follow those guidelines in the event to control spread?
Senator Merritt, I think what your emphasis is guidelines. I completely agree with you. Guidelines are not mandates. So I think this bill clarifies that our government's not going to mandate the restriction of our religious liberties to our citizens, which, again, no government in Georgia did. And it's also why the governor has been extremely supportive of this legislation. Does not prohibit a church from following any public health guidelines, does not prohibit the public health from issuing guidelines. For example, I know my church had voluntary restrictions along with many faith-based institutions in Georgia on limiting numbers and church attendances, but I'll give a personal example. You can't receive communion, which many churches do, via Zoom. So there are restrictions that we're placing on the practice of certain Georgians' faiths by not allowing some form of in-person worship. So I think that is the crux of the bill. It doesn't prohibit if a public health agency in Georgia requires an outright which we had for several weeks in Georgia, an outright shutdown, it would include churches. It would only be if when the opening of institutions or of businesses become opening, it would also include those faith-based as those most favored entities as the first in line to be able to open, along with any other entities that the local or state government deems necessary.
All right. But I guess my concern is the mandates or guidance, let's say mandates, are put in line so that we can keep people healthy or safe or control spread. For faith-based organizations, I get it. You want to go to church, whether they're, is COVID is rampant or whatever disease is happening. You still want the right to go and worship in church. However, what about those that are not faith-based necessarily? They might be atheists, and their argument is, well, you're still putting us at risk because you're going into a setting where there could be spreading and we can't control the virus or whatever is happening. So then we're infringing on someone else's right. So that's my concern.
Okay, we're okay, because I told you hearing only since since you had done the.
Oh, just hear it on.
This is hearing only because he didn't get me the amendment till late. Okay. I believe number 5 was next real quickly. Quick question.
Yeah, I just don't really understand. You're saying other businesses, but the wording in here, and maybe you address this, but I still don't understand it, is religious institutions, I'm reading on line 27, religious institutions and places of worship, the same degree of freedom to meet as is afforded the most favored entity or set of entities. What's that most favored entity? You threw out a couple of examples of businesses, but there's different levels of necessary.
Where that actually applies. And that most favored entity status is what's being created, as I understand the measure, and if Legislative Council wants to correct, is being created in line 16 through 21. Line 22 to 26 is where the remedy can come into effect if it's violated. But I'm trying to find it pursuant to requires closure or limitation of any business or other facility otherwise open to the public use or patronage. So if a business or other facility is allowed open by the government, if that restriction is lifted, the faith-based institution being defined a most favored entity would automatically be in there, whether they're listed in the lift or not, is the way I've interpreted it. If you want a more detailed answer, Frontline Policy Council didn't help initially draft it, but they've been very good at having their legal counsel look at it as well. They've given a pretty good testimony if that's something the committee wants to do now or hold off until it's heard again.
Yeah, I still don't understand the levels of business because there's some that are just recreational versus some that are necessary for survival. So
I'll leave it up to the chair if you want.
Let's do this. We're hearing only. If we can, let's pick.
Hold off.
Be brief.
Be very brief, okay, and then because you're answering his.
Thank you. Just want to clarify real briefly. First of all, this is in accordance with the Supreme Court's decision in multiple cases post-COVID, and it just says that if there's if a local government or any government of any level sets in place restrictions for the public, for any business or other entity, and there are several tiers of that. So they'll say, for small businesses this, or for this set of businesses we're going to have this entity. The Supreme Court has stated that in order to protect religious freedom, the best thing to do is to grant religious institutions, specifically places of worship, most favored status, so we don't see what we did have during COVID, which was instances in which you had package stores and some department stores were given 25% capacity, which is several hundred people, and churches in the same local area were given a cap of 25 individuals, even when their facility could hold several thousand. So it would say if the government decides, less than 25% capacity and everyone has to wear masks and spread out, whatever those restrictions are, they have to be equally applied. So this is more of an equal application than it is the most favored status is an equal application thing, ensuring that you cannot subjugate people of religious value as a second class of citizen, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Does that answer your concern, Senator?
Okay, very good. Senator Parrott, I'm going to let you close us out real
thank
quickly.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize that I turned my microphone off. Apologize, I had to take a phone call, so I'm coming in a little late, and I hope I'm not being repetitive, but if I am, forgive me. So that was very helpful, Taylor. Thank you. What is the Supreme Court case? You did just jingle my memory.
Yes, ma'am. It's Tandon v. Newsom is one of them. Another one was, forgive my memory. There were 3 total cases. So that was the main one where they ruled that. And I can quote from the opinion: governments run afoul of the free exercise clause whenever they treat any comparable secular activity more favorably than religious exercise. So again, it's just ensuring parity between religious entities and whatever the most.
So like you were saying, if the grocery store is a bad example. A concert could be at a certain level of capacity. A church could be too.
Correct.
So did they find any difference between something like a drugstore or a grocery store and churches?
So again, it's the they did not. But if the government decides, okay, for a drugstore, it might be a smaller building, but it's going to be 25% capacity. If that's the sort of most favored restriction, if that's the loosest restriction, then that one would apply in a religious context as well.
Let me ask you this. I mean, this is really, really difficult because people, feel so strongly about their need to worship, and I get it. However, that type of congregation is more risky than like going to a grocery store, right? Depending on how crowded the building is. I just remember how many people died in Albany from that funeral in the beginning of COVID. It was a whole lot of people. So do you think that it is any riskier to be in a packed church than like a grocery store during an outbreak of something?
I do not, no ma'am, and why I say that is because we're talking about the restrictions that they would be, or the status they would be granted would be on par with whatever status the government deems to be within the bounds of medical necessity or medical prudence. So if there's a shutdown, if we have a future pandemic and there's a shutdown, and we have, they say these businesses close outright, but we determined that it is okay for this class of businesses to open to 25% capacity, then they're admitting that there is a need for that, and the Supreme Court has ruled that it's a violation of the First Amendment to say that there's a need for business to be conducted more than for a religious act of worship to be conduced. And again, this applies.
So did they equate the need to buy food at a grocery store with the need to go to church?
It's not. It is something where the Supreme Court has said that it is to be a most favored status, and that is the intent of the First Amendment.
I'll review the opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Roberts?
I apologize. Senator Parrott made me think of something. Are we just talking about pandemic? Because as I'm reading through here, it says emergency management. So this would be applicable after a hurricane, after some other situation to where, and again, I'll use Katrina as an example. When we were down there, Governor Barber made businesses shut down. There were Walmarts outside of Picayune and others that were required to shut down. So it wasn't necessarily somebody thinking somebody's getting sick. They did it during search and rescue operations and stuff like this, so we could kind of manage the population, if you will. So would this be applicable in those situations like that also?
Yes.
Yes, sir. That's
okay.
correct.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. We're going to come back. If you will be ready, if you'll get me the information on the amendment that you had brought forth, and I believe it was to separate between federal and state issues, if you'll get that to me, and so when we come back again, we'll have that clarified, if you would, for us.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to apologize again for that honest confusion on the vote of the floor, so I appreciate the correction. I do sincerely apologize for that.
They'll keep you straight.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you much. Appreciate it. All right. Next. Representative, I was going to say Senator, but I won't do that. Representative Anderson, HB 1044. This looks familiar. Is this you're going LC 472715? Am I correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Have I seen this before?
You have. Most of this you have seen before. Yes, sir. As I mentioned to somebody earlier, when I'm teaching my 9-year-old grandson to play chess and he makes a bad move, sometimes he says, "Papa, can I redo that?" So this is my "Papa, can I redo this?" We passed last session House Bill 193, came through this committee. The House passed it, the Senate passed it, a very good bill. It raised the public works purchasing threshold that required bidding from $100,000 to $250,000. That lift was made because the $100,000 was set when the Public Works purchasing law was put into place in the year 2000 and had never been addressed, never been adjusted for any type of cost increases, that sort of thing. Again, good bill, well vetted in both chambers, passed, got to the governor's desk. The governor's staff loved the bill, but what they didn't like was the fact that the bill only applied to local governments. They wanted it to apply to state level purchasing also. So what we've done is we've taken the same language, the same concept. We went through and found every state agency that could potentially be touched with this purchasing limit, went to them and said, hey, would you like to participate in it? Would you like to be a part of this bill? Some of them actually came back and said no. DOT came back and they said, no, we don't want to be a part of that. We've got our own purchasing arrangement, that sort of thing. So what we've done, in addition to addressing Title 36, which was our local governments, which is what the bill last year did, we've also addressed Title 13, a couple of areas in Title 20 with our education departments, and Title 50 with this bill, simply increasing that Public Works purchasing limit from $100,000 to $250,000.
As I understand this, basically these entities, you were vetoed by the governor, correct?
Yes, sir.
Because you did not include these entities that you have now included.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And their non-bid limit is raised to 250 from 100 is what we're dealing with.
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's how what I was.
250, I think you may have said.
250,
Yes, sir.
250
Yes.
from 100, okay. And 100 in this day and time is a very low time.
Especially compared, here we are 24 years later. And,
24 years later? Wow.
Yes, sir.
Let's see, number 6. Senator.
Motion at the appropriate time.
Motion, okay. Any other discussion? You got a second? Second, okay. Any discussion? None? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. Senator Anderson, if you can get along with the governor, you can get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, committee.
All right, let's see. Just as a general announcement, our OPLA normal person has been Nathan Corbett. He is not here today because he is in the business of going with his wife to the hospital to deliver a baby. So he's not with us, so we have a new Georgian coming on board. So say thankful to him. And then I had been asked to handle the, do you have a Senate sponsor?
Yes, sir. Senator Watson carried the bill last year and has asked.
Mocha, we will reconsider. Okay. And I will handle the first one that's going forward. He had asked me. All right, with that, everybody's dismissed. You can go to the Waffle House, right?